Welcome to Sipping Success, the ultimate podcast for all things beverage and alcohol. We are here to quench your thirst for insights, analysis, and a splash of entertainment. Get ready to dive into the world of beverages with us. From the latest trends to in-depth discussions with industry leaders, we've got it all covered. Whether you're a connoisseur or a curious sipper, Sipping Success is your go-to guide. Join us as we uncork knowledge, raise a glass to innovation, and help you elevate your brand to new heights. So grab your favorite drink, sit back, and let's sip success together. Tune in to Sipping Success and drink in the wisdom. Cheers. This podcast is brought to you by Mushroom Media, the go-to digital media agency for all things marketing. From crafting captivating campaigns to decoding social media sorcery, Mushroom Media is here to empower your brand and help you scale. So whether you're brewing, distilling, or concocting the next big thing, Mushroom Media has a solution for you.
All right. Thank you, Mark Clinard, for joining us here. Mark is the owner of Both Barrels Wine. Great to have you on.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me, Casey.
Thank you so much. And you're joining us from Florida, is that right?
Yeah, I'm in Miami.
Okay, wonderful. Well, let's get into your background here. Could you tell us a little bit about your history and background? You are, of course, a distributor of fine wines. So could you tell us how you got into the industry?
Sure. Well, I started out as a bartender, as a lot of people in the industry did. And the manager at the restaurant where I was working was fired one day, and the owner came in and turned around to me and said, "You're in charge of the wine program," and then he left the building.
Oh,
and
wow.
So it was a very abrupt jump into the industry. So I ended up just reading everything I could about wine. This is circa 1989, by the way.
Okay.
And ended up getting recruited out of that position into fine wine sales for a local distributor in Greensboro, North Carolina. And then I worked in the wholesale side for a little while, and then I got into the supplier side in the early 90s, back when the Australian wine was kind of becoming the hot category. And I stayed in that side of the business, mostly on the imported side as a regional rep for 7 years, and then bought into a company out of Seattle called the Click Wine Group. And they had a more diverse portfolio, including some Australian wines and some French wines and Spanish products. And so I did that for quite some time and pretty much stayed on the importing side for most of my career. And as of the last 5 years, adding the wholesale distribution to the imported side.
Okay, great. So you had mentioned when you were getting started in the 90s, Australia was a really hot location to bring wine into the U.S. Can you kind of enlighten us on the trends right now?
Yeah, the trends right now, it's interesting how the sort of pendulum swings back and forth between, Southern Hemisphere and Northern Hemisphere. I would say that Northern Hemisphere, with what's happening in the Provence Rosé category, Sancerre, White Burgundy, Vermentino, Southern Italian Reds, pretty much anything from Spain, including Albarino and Trixadura. I think the old world is kind of charming people away from maybe categories that were more entrenched, like California, New Zealand, Argentina, and Australia. So I see that happening now.
Okay. And then let's kind of maybe dive into the day-to-day of your business. Can you kind of walk us through your overall business strategy, like at the beginning of the year, or maybe as we kind of sit into the fourth quarter here? What are maybe some strategies you're looking to end the year strong with?
Yeah, well, Miami's quite a unique market because it's, even though there's a lot of year-round residents here, it's still very dependent on season, which, kicks up when all the other areas start to see some snowfall. So from November through April, it's the big season. And for some distributors, including myself, it's at least 50% of their total revenue, if not profit, certainly revenue. And so, the strategy from my side is, gearing up for that season, making sure that I'm aware of what's going on in the industry, what the hot new restaurants are, who the retail players are, And keep in mind, my area is quite small. I'm just selling basically to 2 counties.
Okay.
I'm not a statewide distributor. I plan to at some point, but right now I'm really focusing on the same areas that Michelin is focusing on, which is, Miami-Dade County, basically. So, I'm looking for, restaurants that are not part of any national chain, that are independent, can make their own decisions, and that have a savvy wine program where stuff that I'm bringing in would make a difference.
Okay, great. So that allows you, it's almost like you're, I mean, I know Miami's a big city, but as far as like a business and in a strategy, it almost probably feels like a small town to you just because you're just hitting that one particular market, right?
Yeah, it's 6.2 million people. So it's bigger than Boston. It's bigger than the DC metro area, including Baltimore. It's become a pretty massive town. It's also an extremely international town.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of, it's something like a third of all Spanish wines sold in America are sold in this county.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, there's some very interesting reasons why you'd want to be an importer here. And it's no coincidence that Southern Glazers started in Miami and was able to build a $26 billion company off the heels of their success here.
And so tell me, like, with your being in the industry since the late 80s, early 90s, what are some things that you've done to adapt over the years?
Well, the first thing I do is don't listen to the media. If the media is talking about something, it means the trend has already happened. I like to be sort of at the forefront. And, the fine wine business is very, very closely aligned with the fine restaurant industry. If you're spending time in the stores and you're trying to build a brand in the stores, in the retail environment, you're a little bit too late. So you really have to be talking to Psalms, talking to attention forming restaurateurs that are on the cutting edge of cuisine. So give you an
Mhm.
example. Greek wines, which have been sort of a tertiary, old world business here in the U.S., have now become one of the most interesting parts of my portfolio because the hot trend is Mediterranean.
Mm.
All the new restaurants here, save two or three, have that Mediterranean style where they're blending, Turkish and Lebanese and Greek, a little bit of Italian, but much more into the sort of eastern side of the Aegean and Mediterranean side. And so those trends I see as being something that might last for quite some time.
Okay. What specific maybe tactics or tools are you using to grow your business within that two county region you have been talking about?
One of the things that I've done over the years is, when you get a lead and you find, for instance, an account that's maybe in a part of town that you don't normally travel to, you kind of have to assess what's around it, because logistically, I have to be careful about spending, where I'm sending the product. It could be most distributors lose a lot of income trying to run around the territory and burning up, logistics money and time and paying drivers to deliver one case to a customer that's across the county. So what I try to do is find out if from that lead, are there other accounts in the area that I could sell to? I have a pretty big portfolio, so I look at the whole neighborhood as a holistic approach to selling. Is there a good independent wine shop there? Is there a caterer there? Is there maybe an independent hotel? So soup to nuts, trying to carve out a mini territory within my territory so that when my truck stops there, it's hitting 5, 6 accounts and it's much more profitable.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, can you talk about really, I mean, at any point, whether it be recent or in the past, like any particular challenges or obstacles you faced, you overcame, and something that you're proud of?
Um, well, we can certainly talk about some of the challenges. I don't know how well I overcame them, but
Yeah.
we had a little thing called the anti-French sentiment that happened when
Uh,
you probably I don't need to belabor the point. Everybody remembers the freedom fries and all that stuff.
yeah.
I had the fastest growing French wine brand in the country at the time, and it was selling about 500,000 cases a year.
Okay.
And it was, 75% of the profit of the company at the time. And then all of the retailers took it out to support our quest for weapons of mass destruction,
Hmm.
and pretty much killed the company. So that was challenging. So that was
Wow.
not something I recovered from. However, I landed on my feet in terms of I sold my shares in the company to my other partners, and I ended up starting a new company and was able to capture some different trends. I got out of the French category for a while because it was really a mess, to be honest with
Hmm.
you. And I was able to pivot and get into Spanish wine, which was kind of becoming a real curiosity with a lot of fine wine buyers out there. And that was sort of my salvation on that end of it. Now, another challenge that happened, and I'm not alone in this, is the COVID. When COVID hit, it helped the stores, but my company has always been on premise oriented.
Okay.
And in fact, at the time, I was selling 90% of my goods to restaurants, and so they all shut down. This was in the DC area, by the way. And
Hmm.
so I decided to move to the one part of the world that seemed to have shaken off the COVID, regulations, and they were open for business. And so I restarted the company in Miami.
Okay. Okay. So that was the impetus for starting up in Miami.
That's right.
And so you've given us some good points of interest in terms of like trends from when you started. And I thought it was interesting, like one of your talking points there was, don't listen to the media and whatnot. How do you stay up to date on latest trends and developments? Can you shed some more light on that?
I mean, honestly, it's interesting when I deal with a lot of caterers, and it's always interesting to see how much their list is the changes, excuse me, I should say, from month to month. It was a time where you had to have Bellinis, and you had to have mimosas, and you had to I'm speaking more in terms of general libation, but when it comes to wine, it was oaky Chardonnays, yada yada. But when these caterers are doing parties, they're getting specific requests from consumers about what they want to have at that party.
Hmm.
And so it changes almost every 6 months. Now you got to have Provence Rosé, you got to have Sancerre or some sort of Loire Sauvignon Blanc. You got to have they want Rioja, they want Paso Robles Cab, they don't want Napa Cab. So I listen to those caterers, and quite honestly, my portfolio has changed, I should say, over the last year to mirror what those consumer requests are. Even though I profess to be an expert in all things from all areas, if you have too big of a portfolio that tries to be all things to all people, a good chunk of it's not going to sell, and it's going to
Hmm.
be dead inventory, and it's going to kill the company. So I'm trying to sort of pick the eyes out of the trends that are going on right now. The
Hmm.
other thing that I would say is when I go to restaurants, I sit at a bar and I look around the room and I see what's going out. I mean,
Hmm.
this is not some massive secret. Everybody in my industry does it to some extent, but I think it's really important to go to cutting edge restaurants and see what people are ordering.
Hmm.
Look at the bartender, see the cocktail trends, see the wines that people are asking for by name, call brands. But Pinot Grigio and Chardonnay and Cabernet are call brands. Sauvignon Blanc, as of late, has become the number one interest in fine wine dining. Sancerre, even though most people don't know that it's also Sauvignon Blanc, that's become a hot item. So I listen to what consumers in restaurant environments are asking for, um,
Yeah.
and I don't listen to the media.
Great. Yeah. So let's discuss any partnerships or collaborations you've formed. So this could be to help your current business there that you have right now, or anything significant in the past that partnership wise or collaboration that made a difference for you.
Yeah, in every country that I bring wine in from, I have either an export manager of a company that I trust, or I have a person on the ground that I pay to manage the flow of business. It's critical to first have a direct buying relationship with a winery, not just a guy with a brand.
Mm-hmm.
To put it like that, it's there's a lot of people with a lot of brands. You really need to drill down to who's running the winery operation and have a direct dialogue with them. But then also have a man on the ground that can kind of execute for you when you're not there. The other partnership that I have is with a label designer, because some of the brands that I do are agency brands, and the other ones, and several of them, I should say, are owned brands that I've created from scratch. And I have a history of creating brands for the U.S. market. And so I have about 5 different artists that I go to. I put the tender out to them to show them the opportunity, the brand brief, and then they come back to me with ideas. And they know that I'm serious, so they tend to show me good designs without me having to necessarily pay for it up front. They know that if I choose them, I'm going to pay them well. And so that kind of collaboration with designers, I think, is critical.
So being able to create brands, does that give you a leg up on strengthening relationships with wineries then?
Yes and no. It depends on the size of the winery. If it's a big winery, they want everything. They want their own brands. They want your brands. They want to burn through the product that's in those tanks and barrels, and they got harvest coming up, so they need space. If it's a small winery, they're wary of somebody else's brand, and then you have to be careful with that because they may have better juice, and I love dealing with small wineries because the juice tends to be way better.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to be careful because they don't always put the best juice in my label. I've had many situations where we tasted the product, it was fantastic, and then the moment I left the country, they put something else in the bottle. Not naming names, just saying
Sure.
it can be very tricky. Plus, don't forget, you own that inventory now. Nobody else is it's not going to be sold anywhere else. It's up to you to buy it. It's up to you to sell it.
Yeah. So all the risk is on you. Okay.
Exactly.
So, with all your experiences, what sort of advice would you give to somebody coming into importing and distributing fine wine?
Yeah, I think it's if you're coming in from another industry, it's very tough to take, with very few exceptions, it's very tough to take experiences from other industries and apply it to this one. Because it's so compliance heavy. Don't underestimate the powder keg of money you're going to need to be able to sell properly if you're going to be selling as a national importer. Don't underestimate the kind of margins you're going to need to scale up the business. Most people will tell you it's a 30% business, but that's for the big established distributors that were started after Prohibition, and they've had already bought and sold all of their infrastructure, and they can afford to work at 30%. You need to have much longer margins because there's going to be spoilage, there's going to be brands that don't work, there's going to be a lot of headaches along the way. It's like building a house. It always takes longer and costs more than you think it's going to take.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? So in your business, the way that you've really built a nice career, what sort of values do you abide by? What helps you? What's kind of your guiding light in dealing with whether it be vendors, employees, and also customers?
If you're a small distributor and you're selling against the giants out there, you have to be nimble. You have to have there's an old expression, it's not one thing you do, it's everything you do. You got to have great product, you got to have better logistics. And I stress that because we live in an age now when people are ordering stuff on Amazon on their phone, and if it doesn't come the next day, they're disappointed. Being a restaurateur, what they don't want to hear is that they have to get their order in by 3 to get it next week. So I think having a really bulletproof logistics, taking the logistics very seriously, which a lot of fine wine distributors don't, I think is critical. It's in terms of values, I have a very good palate, but it's not a Somm palette. It's more a palette that's designed for successful brands. Like I kind of know where the American consumer is now. Having said before, like Miami consumer is not necessarily an American consumer; it's very international.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to be wary of what flavor profiles are going to work, and don't just buy stuff that you like. Buy stuff pragmatically that makes sense. It's going to sell. You can always have some pet brands that you love that are yours, and you can drink them at night if nobody else does. But you have to meet market demand in terms of the flavor profile, and then more importantly, you've got to be better than everybody else when it comes to logistics.
So are logistics and staying nimble, are those that help separate you, particularly right now in Miami? Are there any other, say, differentiators you think you have over competition?
Yeah, I spent the last 2 years, analyzing the Miami market before I jumped into the distribution side. And what I noticed was there was certain deficiencies in the marketplace. There wasn't a good, after 2 frosts back to back, there wasn't any Salsair under 20 in the wholesale price. I have the best price Salsair in the market, and everybody wants it. And I could make more money on it, but I use it as leverage to get everything else sold. I have a vodka brand that I picked up that I sell very inexpensively. It's very high quality vodka, but I sell it, and I'm not a spirits guy, but I know people need it. I know that restaurants need that cheap cost of goods for their well. So I have certain sacrificial lambs that I put out there. I don't lose money on it, but I have certain things I put out there that I know folks need to make their whole beverage program work. You got to have some sakis now. I have amazing sakis that at all price points. I have Korean soju. So I'm bringing those things in, not because I think it makes the portfolio look pretty, but I know speak back to the trends thing. Like I know there's some trends that are happening that are bringing less traditional beverages to a more worldly wine list now. And so you're seeing Junmai Daijengo sake on a wine list, that whereas years ago you would never have seen that. It would just been for sushi places. So I'm trying to bring in things that make a difference and kind of set me apart, but at the same time not have a bloated portfolio that people can't use.
Yeah. Well, that's great. We could probably have a whole nother episode on sake, but that's some interesting insight on the strategy of strategically carrying other types of spirits. We've been talking with Mark Clinard, owner of Both Barrels Wine. Mark, for those in the audience, if anybody wants to connect with you or think about partnering with you, what's the best way to reach out? Where do people find you?
Well, I'm on the net at bothbarrelswine.com. I'm also on all the big, social media platforms. You can find me pretty easily. There's a phone number and email on my website. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk about collaboration. If somebody's got some interesting products they want to bring to market, or even if they want to talk about, partnerships and growing the brand and growing the company in other areas.
Okay, well, great. Thanks for joining us here. And this has been another episode of Sipping Success, brought to you by Mushroom Media. And Mark, thanks again for the conversation here. It's been really insightful. And welcome to our community. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Casey. Nice to meet you and nice to chat with you.
And that's a wrap on another insightful episode of Sipping Success, brought to you by Mushroom Media. We hope our discussions have left you thirsting for more knowledge in the world of beverages and alcohol. Stay connected with us on social media for updates. And remember, the journey to success is best enjoyed one sip at a time. Keep exploring trends, connecting with leaders, and scaling your brand. Until our glasses meet again, cheers to your continued success. And may your cups always runneth over with inspiration. We'll catch you in the next episode.